Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Desi Connection with me, Adil Ansari, your host. On today's episode, we talk to Sadaf Javed, a good friend of mine who has been a marketeer for quite a long time and has worked with me as a management trainee starting off in Unilever. She worked in Unilever for about 17 years and moved around with them quite a bit and settled in the United Kingdom. She's currently a leadership coach, and this is what we talk about. It's a lot of interesting conversation around the whole concept of coaching leaders of different backgrounds and different styles, and I think you'll enjoy it as well. There were a lot of aha moments for me at least, and I'm hoping some similar aha moments for you. So without any further delay, Sadaf Javed. Sadaf, कैसी हो यार? It's been a long time.
Hey Adil, how are you? Yes, long time, but glad we are reconnecting
Absolutely.
now.
And just for those who are listening and watching the podcast, Sadaf and I go way back, almost 20 years. And we first met when I came to Unilever as a management trainee. And I believe you were maybe one or two batches senior to me.
Yeah, yes, I
One
think one
batch.
batch.
And it was an interesting
Hmm.
couple of years that I had in Unilever. And it's like we always say, it's like a university on its own. So I learned a lot of marketing specifically there during my time and tenure. So let me start off by asking you, what has been your trajectory in terms of your professional life? You're currently living and residing in the UK. So take me through how you got out of university and which university was it and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, so um, I used to be I my university was IBA in Karachi, which is a business school for those who don't know. Um, Before that, I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. So my first interaction and experience of Pakistan real life was IBA Karachi itself. So big shock to the system, but you find your ground eventually after stumbling. Then I got lucky because then I got into the management trainee program of Unilever, and that went on for a good amount of time. So purely in marketing, moving from brand roles to category role, then eventually to a regional South Asia role, and then eventually I made it to the global role in
Okay.
London. That's how I moved. And The last role I held, I was leading a global hair brand, and I was the global director for it for Sunsilk. But da 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 da, that's where it happens. I decided to leave Unilever in 2022 after a good 17 years, and then obviously a lot of points came in. Why now when things are going okay and whatnot? So a bunch of opportunities came in the form of conditions that allowed me to do it, and then I decided to take the plunge, get out of it, and then do something on my own, which is the usual thing that we tell ourselves during our careers, that I want to do something on my own. But eventually, I decided to plunge into the world of leadership coaching. So I'm now executive leadership coach, as they call it, and I've started my own little company called Quiet Thrivers. So I do leadership coaching as well as business coaching, and my area of focus is introverts. So I try to help introverts so that they can unlock and stop killing themselves in their own heads of negative self perception and allow them to grow, even though the corporate game is sometimes against them. So that's the overall
Okay.
journey
And if
that
I
I want
was
to
to
talk about
ask,
it.
starting something of your own is always an idea that people have, especially in the FMCG world, because they want to take something that they've learned and apply it in a business idea.
Yeah.
This whole idea of leadership coaching, did it have roots in anything that you went through during your FMCG time that you said, okay, this is maybe a small area that I could probably delve into?
I would be lying if I say that it was always my true calling and I've gone through so much that always I used to say, no, I want to do something for the people who will work for me or contribute and give back. It was never like this. It was, I think, the last couple of years of my last role that I realized I was gauging um, conversations that were giving me energy and conversations that were taking energy away from me. And what I was noticing that the things that were giving me energy when I was trying to solve
Mm,
problems, either building conversation about my team, trying to help them to grow, trying them to figure out a complex global corporate system. Those things were giving me energy. Those conversations were less exhausting as I thought, versus the conversation related to the next
okay,
marketing
but then
campaign.
again, as a leader, isn't it anyways the role of managers today to be partially as leaders? And you were already doing that as a manager, weren't you? So why,
I was doing it, but it.
yeah, but
Sorry.
then why take that part and make it into a business? What made you think that there is a possibility here?
Because the type of conversations that I was having, it's a bit tricky when you're part of a system of the
Okay.
organization versus when you are separate from
Mm,
it. Because as a manager who is also a leader, there are things that you have to keep in mind related to the
okay.
organization.
Yeah.
And also, you can't let go of the fact that you might know the person a bit too
Mm,
much or too well or their background. It's very rare that a leader stays in the coaching mindset when they're trying to train their direct reportees. But in coaching, you are forced to only remain in the coaching mindset
that is so interesting.
and you listen without any judgment.
Yeah.
So it's a skill that you have to learn, and you're able to lend help to the other person better.
That makes sense. I can imagine that. Um, Let me ask you something else. We've always been taught to look for niches whenever we try to launch a product or a
Hmm.
service.
Hmm.
This aspect of leadership and focusing on introverts, was this a niche that you identified, or was this just something that you came across as you were thinking about this business model that you're in?
So, as far as my own self awareness is concerned, I was always aware that I'm a extremely introverted person. Um, and however, as a marketer, you eventually figure out that you really can't be a complete introvert if you're a marketer. And people would say things like I'm an
Yeah.
ambivert and whatnot, and I'm kind of against that terminology because it's essentially ambivert is just an introvert trying to make it work in the extroverts
Okay.
world. So it's a survival technique for them in their heads. But anyways, I knew about my own self. um, However, when I was going through my coaching training program itself, and when I started coaching people, that's when I was coming across that most of the people that I was coaching, by coincidence, there were a lot of introverts coming in, and they were generally, um, and they were reaching out to coaches because they were looking for a safe
Mm,
space, where they're able to unload themselves, not be afraid of judgment, because with introverts that's a big problem. They're far more sensitive towards judgment. um, and where they wanted to talk to somebody who understands their professional background as
okay.
well. That's where I was resonating, and then I said, okay, if there's quite an angle in here on helping introverts, and I think I can use my own personal experience to relate to
Okay,
them
and
better.
in terms of introverts, there's been this, I don't know, myth that extroverts tend to climb the leadership ladder faster than introverts. Is there any truth in this?
Yes, and there's a bit history to it
Hmm.
as well. So there's this a lady by the name of Susan Cain. She's written this book, The Quiet, and it's about introvert leadership and the benefits of it. So essentially, what it says is that factually, this whole extrovert versus introvert thing started happening 150 years ago. When the way you grow in the world is by seeking attention, because the value system started changing from a rural based, agri based to industry based urban life. And in the noisy urban life, you have to adjust yourself and you have to kind of get attention towards yourself. So, people who would naturally have that would grow faster
Mm, interesting.
versus the introvert and their value system and whatnot. So, the system started rewarding
And that's still
extroverts
the system here
in the
today?
corporate culture. So now within that system, then you have a cultural aspect to it as well. In the Western culture, um, this is where this was being taken place. The extrovert values were getting rewarded more and more. Whereas in the Asian culture, and by Asia I largely mean places like China and Japan, the and even to some extent Philippines, the introvert values get rewarded over there.
Ah,
So it's considered to be very rude if you cut somebody during a conversation, if you unnecessarily um, try to interrupt and want to ask a question. That's considered to be very rude and crass over there. But in this part of the world, in the Western part of the world, um, according to this lady again, Susan Cain, you used to get rewarded, and that's the reality of it right now as well. She went to the extreme in which she even ended up saying that the financial crisis could have been averted in 2008 if more introverts were in charge,
really?
um, because because the bankers in themselves used to get rewarded by being the investment bankers, especially the mostly extroverts. They had a certain personality, charisma, and you're more bullish with your decision making when you're an extrovert versus an
Wow.
introvert. So she went towards even that. She did the research. So it's an interesting book. So it gives you a premise of it's important to have that kind of a balance. So yes, the system does reward extroverts. And let's be honest, Adil, it's easier to reward somebody who is able to showcase very quickly who
Yeah.
they are, versus somebody's hiding in the
You're waiting
corner,
for your
head down,
results
work
to
hard.
prove what you're doing. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
true.
Exactly. And we know that, in marketing, you will get even rewarded even more,
Yeah.
because that's the job. So, yeah, that the system is not rigged, the system is a
Okay,
bit
but then
lazy.
tell me something. If we're talking about the extrovert within the Western society was given more, let's say, preference, and in the Eastern setup of business, it was the introvert. If we were to switch the roles and get an introvert to work in the Western economy, can they still succeed while being an introvert? And let's do the same in for the extrovert in the Eastern economy.
I don't have the statistics to say whether they will succeed or not, but I can only say it based on my
Mm-hmm.
observation itself. It's
Okay.
harder to succeed. It's harder um, if you add multiple variables to it. So imagine you are a Chinese or a Filipino girl. Let's add the element of gender in there, who moves to this side of the world. your sensibilities are very different, the way you were taught what leadership and wisdom is very different. And then you come
Mm.
here where it is not just about head down, work hard, do your thing, and you'll get rewarded. You have to sell yourself. Is the is what is sometimes told to introverts during their feedback sessions. And even though it might not be said like sell yourself, it is said you need more
Oh,
visibility,
tell me about it. Yeah, that's always the case.
right? So this is the type of feedback. Even people who are not introverted, this feedback really hits you in a very nasty way. And for an introvert it's even deeper, because they're like, yo, you want me to do something which is completely against my own nature. Like how do I
And
do
where does
that?
leadership coaching come
How
in
do I
then?
get visibility?
What you're offering, what do you do in a scenario like this?
So I think the first thing will always be is help them to see that if what they're thinking about themselves is that real
Hmm.
or not. Yeah, so there are two parts to it. One is somebody telling you, and the other thing is you thinking this is your problem. There are two angles to it. So it's very important to see that where is this information coming from. Is it coming from somebody who gave you feedback, or is it your own
Mm.
perception? So hence that questioning has to kind of go into figuring out where is it coming from. So assuming if somebody is giving them that feedback, then you have to understand that what are the steps that they think they can take, which won't make them feel that it's taking away from their value system or their personality or whatnot. So hence you'll have to ask them a series of these questions to get them to a solution which they are comfortable with. Because Adil, if you force them to do some
Yeah.
other methodology, then they'll go back to their natural state. They're not going to continue following it. So it's important, and that's something I believe in as well, that authentic leadership is more important, is very critical. You don't want to change yourself as a person in order to grow in the
But then is
organization.
there space enough in both types of organizations for both type of people, introverts and extroverts, looking within the West and the East? Can both at some point in time flourish at their own pace?
But they do, but the time frame will be
Okay.
different.
So you're saying that maybe the
the
extrovert
ti-
in the Western society might climb the ladder slightly faster than the introvert, but it doesn't mean that the
Faster.
introvert cannot climb the ladder. Okay.
Yes, yes. That's an important aspect
Mm.
to it. It will be a slow burn for
Yeah.
the
And I
introvert.
think it's important to mention here that for some leaders, it's not necessary to really climb the corporate ladder. They're sometimes happy at a certain part of the ladder where they can help others, but that's not seen as being ambitious enough. Have you come across this kind of mindset as well within organizations and the people that you work with?
Yes, and I think that was my own personal
Mm.
struggle as well. Um, you know, um, because I showed ambition for the work that was given to me, or whatever was being asked of me, or whatever I found to be a good initiative to take, I would run through it, but I wouldn't kind of push for, I want that promotion
Yeah,
now, if you don't give it, like I haven't done
yeah.
that. I used to be like, when I think I'm ready, they will give it to
And
me.
do you think that has
you know
always been a
in some
problem?
cases naive, like I just said, so sometimes it's a bit naive of you to
Yeah,
think this way, that, oh, they will give it to me, and if Allah wants, you will get it. It's like those,
thoughts.
because our belief
Yeah,
system is such, right? Those thoughts make you think, it will come to me if it's
yeah.
good for me, type of a situation. So there is that, and those people, they will always be challenged by the system, by given feedback, show ambition, show the drive. You don't want to grow. um, so you might end up getting that type of feedback. um, However, what the way you find peace in this is that if you're very clear about your value
Mm.
system, and I think the age, as soon as you are about to hit 40, you hit 40 and a bit beyond, is
Yeah.
that that is when you start figuring out, I like this and I don't like
Right.
this, I will stand by this and I won't
Mm.
stand by this. So it's very important that before you gets swept away, get swept away by becoming a VP and the CEO and the chairman or whatever, before you get swept away by that, figure out what your values are and just be ready that it will be a battle after
Yeah.
this, because many people will come, they'll challenge you, then it's really up to you that what's important to me and I'm going to hold on to it and
So
not
what I'm
compromise.
learning from
So yeah,
this,
that's
the conversation that we're just having is, even in a situation where somebody is an introvert, you can set your boundaries and you can actually define what is relevant for you from your own self belief versus what the vision of the
yeah.
organization has. But maybe for an introvert, it does become a bit more difficult to hold on to this because there are people like the extroverts who might be making their statements known more, and so it becomes a more challenge for an introvert leader, but they have to hold on to it.
Because if it's important to them, then
Hmm.
they should hold
Okay.
on to it. And that's why whenever I'm going through the coaching process, that's the first thing I make people do, is that do your value system framework first
Exactly.
before anything else. First, figure out who you are and then practice those values. And there's a framework on how to even practice those values, because sometimes, we do all these corporate exercises. We're like, what do I do with these integrity and friendship and love and health? Like, what do I
Yeah.
do with
True.
them? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you need a framework to figure out how to practice it and hold yourself accountable on it. So, that's important for your self discovery itself. And then, Adil, the reality is, maybe for the extrovert, they have a different value
Hmm.
system. For them, success is a value, wealth is a value. So maybe it's important to them. That's what
Can I
drives
ask
them.
something in this
Um,
regard? We are looking at the person as an introvert or an extrovert. Is it possible for us to look at organizations as individuals or entities that are either introverted or extroverted, and then they define their own vision as a company? So, do you think that's possible?
hmm. I don't know how to define a company based on that. I think the way this framework has also been developed, this framework was actually developed for
Hmm.
organizations. That you figure out what your values are, then you define the principles, then the mission and
Okay.
whatnot. So then it started getting attached to people as well. That's why where that conversation started coming from. Find your purpose,
Which
find
the
your why,
organizations have to do on their
who
own
you are.
and then apply. Okay. Okay. So that is
Exactly.
kind of like that.
Yeah. So that's the
Okay.
cycle itself.
Okay.
But organizations themselves, culturally, yes, there would be those organizations that might be a bit more introverted in their cultural context versus some other type
All
of
right.
organization.
Let's move on to another aspect that we had discussed in our conversations offline that I wanted to bring forward. We talk a lot
Hmm.
about accountability in the workspace. And I think one of the
Hmm.
challenges for either an introvert or maybe even an extrovert is, how do you balance compassion as a leader and
Hmm.
accountability? And first, I want you to maybe
Hmm.
even give a clear definition of what is compassion and what is accountability.
So again, there is this lady whose book I really love, because I was very surprised that all these people who are getting really famous for their work are talking about things that you and I wish we could have gone through in the past. You know, because in those days it
Yeah.
was different, right? The value system was different. So there's a lady whose framework really helps in this. She has made a little matrix out of it. Her name is Kim Scott. She was a Google executive. I think she was in Twitter as well. Like all the tech companies she was a part of. So she wrote this book by the name of Radical
Hmm.
Candor. And there are two aspects to it. So if you want to practice radical candor or radical respect, that basically means that you want to be a compassionate leader who at the same time is able to hold its team accountable for the task that they're responsible
Mm.
for without losing the human aspect
Okay.
of it.
Okay. So it's not just about the numbers and the KPI targets. It's also about the individual that's working on it in your team.
Of course, because then the individual is part of the
Mm.
system. Without that individual, it's going to fall flat. However, in order to practice this, Adil, there are two aspects. One is called um, challenge directly,
Mm-hmm.
and the other is called care personally.
Okay.
So you have to care personally if you want to challenge directly, if you want to be a compassionate leader.
I'm laughing right now because I think we both realized what we were missing.
Exactly. And this is the book. It's flipping right now, and there's a little diagram
I see it
right over
correctly.
here.
Perfect.
Okay, cool. So there's a diagram right here. Um, and this diagram is really like a big aha moment for me, because I really thought there's, and it's silly for us to think no, there's only one way. I think simply because only one way was being practiced on us for a very long time in the same
Yeah.
geography. um, but there is a way out. However, um, we have to be wary of the fact that the disclaimer in all this deal is that if you really want to hold people accountable, you have to develop that relationship of trust first.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you don't know the person, you haven't spent enough one on one with them, you don't know what their dreams are, you don't know where they're headed in life, and you're just coming and holding them
But I think
accountable.
that's mainly because in most of our early career, the people that were probably managing us weren't looking at us from a leadership point of view, but from a manager point of view, which, and I don't blame them. Most of them were like pretty much our age, 1 or 2 years here and there, and they were going through the grind just like us, and it was a time of growth. And that kind of realization probably comes with time. So you have to be in a leadership mindset to start telling people what they should aspire to and support them on it. At that time, they were just trying to hit their targets and they were getting us to help them hit their targets. And it was just a trickle down effect, right?
Yes, it was a trickle down effect. I get it. And I also see that, maybe they were scarred. Um, so they kind of said, oh, this is the way
Yeah.
to do it. Um, and the company culture also comes in play, because a lot of um, the environment and the toxicity comes based on who's at the
Mm.
top, and what is their practice
Yeah.
like, right? um, or it also boils down to the to certain individuals as well, because maybe that's the way they are. What I do know is, even though they while they were doing it, you and I both, there wasn't a single moment in those not so pleasant situations where we thought, ah, excellent, I love this style. Like, no, we
Yeah.
never liked it.
And that, I think that shaped the way we
So
were
the
as leaders and managers in our own way. So I guess what you're trying to
Yeah.
say is we could tell it was wrong and we never wanted to do that. So
Yes.
that was also a learning for us. We learned what not to do as leaders and managers. Yeah, I get you.
That's the thing, because unless we say no, this is the way it has to happen, they're right in bashing us, and that's the way we just knew in our DNA, in our basic human instinct, that I get what this person is trying to make me do, I'm not going to do
Yeah,
this ever.
absolutely. In that situation, you have to follow through, but you know that if I was in that position, I would do things differently. Absolutely.
And that is the
Yeah.
litmus test
I
of
wanted
this.
to understand another thing. You've grown as an individual from one position to another. You've led many people from different walks of life. You've had to deal with people who are introverts and extroverts in their own right. But I want to deep down, just kind of like deep dive specifically into Asians surviving the
Hmm.
Western corporate value system. And I talk about not just Asians from the subcontinent, but generalizing the Asians when they move into the Western way of working. Tell me a bit about your experience as to what these people face as challenges, and how are you trying to help them cope with the changes?
Hmm. Listen, I my own personal experience. Um, when you are in a country like Pakistan, and within Pakistan, if you are in the best company, you know that you're part of a very few who have made it, and the people who groom you and the system that grooms you
Mm.
is the best in the country. So, hence, within that system, you also have a higher chance of shining and standing out.
Externally or
Yeah,
within
so
the
uh,
organization?
within, I'm talking
Okay.
within Unilever, right? So within, for example, if we were in Unilever Pakistan, um, if you are the best, then you'll stand out and whatnot. Your competitive set might be a
Mm.
bit limited, but then when you go to the outside world, um, and you are in this organization which is global, so mostly Western people or with people who have Western value system. You go into that system. Now these are people who all of them want to win at any cost, and all of them have come from their countries or from this system where they have had the best education. They went to the best companies, and now they're in Unilever. So you are trying to compete
Mm.
with the best. So there the first instinct is that, for example, when if a regional sales man moves from the regional sales office to the head office, first they'll be like, what? I have to go get tea myself.
Yes.
you know right, like, I'm not going to have a big sales force that I can stand up and give a bit lecture and speech and motivate them, and they all clap and say, wow, wow, sir,
Yeah.
you're amazing. Yeah. And then when you go into, it's a similar feeling, Adil. So you go in, you realize you're not the king, you're not the queen anymore, and everybody's out there. It's Hunger Games. So I think the first shock to the system is that the competitive landscape and the level of skill needed suddenly goes
Mm.
way up.
Okay.
Yeah. Then you start looking at the culture itself. That the culture is very
Mm.
individualistic versus where we come from. We'll casually go on somebody's desk and say,
Yeah.
let's have, a cup of tea. Over here, people have blocked
Oh, yeah.
diaries, and in Germany, it's even more
Yeah.
intense, right? So there will be a coffee chat discussion blocked in the diary. Those things are a bit weird because you're kind of used to being a very resourceful South Asian who just wants to get
Yeah.
things done. And so those aspects of culture and the way we handle tasks day to day, that's a big hit on the
Yeah.
system. But I think for Pakistanis and Indians, since we're a bit more, in some cases, direct and sometimes abrasive, so it's and we're quite influenced by the Western
Mm.
culture, especially people who are part of our world in Pakistan. We're very heavily influenced by them, so it's easier maybe for us to eventually stumble, copy, and mold into it. But the rest of the Asian world, it's harder for them because they're not so seeped into the Western
Yeah.
culture. And they themselves are the quiet ones. They're the quiet ones. They want to sit, observe. They're not just going to talk for the heck of it. So their cultural shock runs a bit
Yeah.
deeper versus South Asians, is
Yeah.
what I've
And
observed.
honestly, when I think back to some of the scenarios that I've been in, I can also identify where I was brought into this work exercise where we had people from around the world in this new organization that I'm working for. And
Hmm.
I was made the team lead. And you know me, I'm very extrovertive and talkative. And I had two
Yeah.
people from South Korea in my team. And the ladies were
Hmm.
super intelligent, but I realized that in the workshop session, they weren't saying much. While the other three
Hmm.
people were talking, they weren't saying much. And I realized that it
Hmm.
was basically because they were intimidated by the amount of conversational space that I was taking over and passing on the
Hmm.
conversation to others, saying, "What do you think? What do you think?" And I had to actually reassess myself, and I had to start saying, "All right, guys, let's take a few minutes, let's jot down our answers and our thoughts, and let's put them together on a piece of paper." You will not imagine the amount of content that came out from their pieces of paper versus
Hmm.
the rest of the four that were talking, including
Hmm.
myself. So
Hmm.
it is a mindset
Hmm.
change, and I do believe you're right. Whether we're Pakistani, Indian, and to some extent maybe the Bangladeshi, as well as in the Middle East, the Egyptians and the Lebanese, we're very loud and
Yes.
we can technically be more Western than the other Far Eastern population of Asia and the Middle East. So it is easier for us, but more difficult for them. Adding to this, my next question would be, being a woman from Asia, is there an expectation that you have to be more extrovertive to get your points across at a leadership level? Or is it okay to have your own style and be still a silent leader coming from an Asian country being a woman?
So that's the paradox, um, because um, being a woman leader, it's anyways harder to be heard in the system. Some of it is our own fault, and some of it the environment sometimes is not
Explain
conducive.
to me how it's your own fault, because
Um,
this is a talking point.
yes, a lot of things are in
Mm.
our heads. The usual, why I don't deserve to be sitting here, which we now like to put a label of imposter
Yeah,
syndrome.
but then that is with every
um,
Tom, Dick, and Harry who has landed a job in Europe versus working in your own country back home. We always have that. Is it more with the women?
it's more with the
Mm.
women, um, because you end up feeling as there is a sense of responsibility. You're a woman, you finally got there, so you have to make the most of it. And then we women in general, they like to doubt themselves as a pastime. um, uh, oh, this person sounds smarter, I wish I had said it. um, um, or your male colleague, you kind of said, you gave an idea quietly, silently, but your male colleague kind of
Mm.
pounced on it, regurgitated it, and made it his own.
Okay.
That has happened a lot of times, to me
But
as
that's
well.
because you were a woman or
And
because
you're
you
like,
yourself are an introvert? Because that could have happened to a guy being an introvert as well.
it's very difficult to define, what
Mm.
caused what I do know is that being a woman, you in that environment where there are only majority male leaders, um, whether I cannot say it for all the women, but I do know is that whenever I've had male bosses or male leaders, my behavior changes a
Uh,
bit versus if I have a female
and
leader.
how does it change? Tell me about the
Yeah.
differences between the two scenarios.
I've seen myself to be a bit more direct, with the female bosses, um, and a bit more physiologically relaxed.
Interesting.
Whether they can see it or not is different. I'm talking the system that's happening
Hmm.
inside of me. Yeah, with a male boss, um, you kind of adjust yourself a bit, because there's a cultural aspect to it as well. Because I can't remove the fact that I'm a Pakistani
Hmm.
woman, right? So there is a bit of hesitation or reservation. There's a cultural aspect to it, as well. So you kind of are a bit more,
Reserved?
um,
Yeah.
subdued, reserved, with the male leadership versus the female leadership. Um, and also, coincidentally, the male leaders are usually far more senior than your female leader as well. So they might be occupying the bigger
Okay.
offices as well because the system rewards them as well, right? So there's that aspect of I've observed myself as
Okay.
hesitating
All right.
itself when I've had that. Um, Now, does it have an impact on my confidence and whatnot in those moments? Yes, I sometimes feel. However, yes, I've also seen that when I've had my own time with them, then eventually I can be direct with them. So it's just because that's the introvert in me, is that I need a bit of time to analyze the information, to figure out who they are, then I'll open up. But with the female, the few factors you're already aware of, so you can kind of go a bit more
All right.
charging in.
And the people
Um,
that you are coaching, I want to understand first from an age perspective. The younger people that you coach, what are the key challenges that they face versus the older people that you're coaching? What are the challenges that they face?
the younger people, the most of the challenges are related to getting their voice
Mm,
heard,
okay.
communication impact, visibility. These are the things that they struggle with. And interesting, another theme that has started coming up is them questioning the progression being
Offered to them.
promised to them versus what's, yes, versus what's out there, right? That's a
Yeah.
big issue. And the older ones are usually related to what's next for me, where do I want to go. So what I find interesting is that the older ones, that you're getting them to imagine their ideal future state and then work backwards. So there's a lot of that being employed with them. uh, their self discovery goes a bit deeper. And for the younger lot, it's more about fighting the
Wow.
system
Interesting.
itself. So not letting go of their feeling challenged, because we know that Gen Z and the young millennials, they don't want to let go of their identity. They're very clear about who they are and why should they let go of their values and whatnot. So they're people like who didn't want to continue their job because the company was going back on the promise of
Yeah.
climate change.
Tell me something. You talked very interesting topic, which also comes up in our organizational conversations as well with people about the young generation having an expectation of the next step promised to them and that kind of timeline. Do you think that they are fair in this evaluation, or coming from a Gen Z mindset, do you think that they're asking for too much too quickly?
Listen, Adil, I discussed this in my previous call as well with when we were doing the live session with Hakima. We didn't touch upon this too much, but what I've understood is, why should they not ask us for it if they're working so hard? Or let's, I don't even want to use the word hard. If they're doing their hours, they're delivering on their tasks, then telling them, listen, I don't have, you are ready, I don't have anything for you, wait.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exploitation, right? Or saying that keep doing what you're doing, you're on track, wait for another 2 3 4 years, whatever, then you can become a brand manager. Nobody has that much of time. Why is it that they're not being patient? Is because they're seeing alternatives which seem better than
Mm.
this. If they would not have been better alternatives, they would have stayed quiet. So the statistics are suggesting this research done by Deloitte for Gen Z. They're saying we'll leave our jobs in the next 1 to 2 years if we don't get the next step
Wow.
upwards.
So there's a lot for an
And that's
HR
a,
department to then think about: career planning, progression planning, and that seems to be not on the table for many HR
no,
departments, right?
no. And I've seen companies doing alternative programs where they're telling the younger lot that you want to do your own gig You want to do your side hustle with the main job, we'll let you do
Okay,
that.
so that's like a
So that has
compromise.
started happening. That's a you can do that. Initially it was very clear, one job and nothing, you can't do your own
Hmm.
thing, but that was the reality of it. And in the past people had to take permission. Now they like, you can do that. And then you can even allocate a day to your side hustle versus your job. So they're trying to come up with these. And if you have a side hustle which is interesting and matches the company values, maybe you bring it and we invest in it.
That's nice.
They're trying to make those models as well, but the current job is not satisfying
Mm-hmm.
them. The When I say current job, I mean the type that we have been
Mm-hmm.
used to doing. Because let's be honest, it's never 9 to
Never.
5. It's always 9 to 9, or maybe 24/7 we're
Yeah, I guess
engaged.
being
um,
coming from a Pakistani perspective, yes, it was never 9 to 5, but in countries like Germany, even though yes, sometimes it's not 9 to 5, but I can manage it. I can push
yes,
around my weight and say I'm not doing it today. I'll do it next day, and that
yes.
is only because the environment is conducive enough for you to say this. Whereas in Pakistan, the culture was not set up in such a way for you to even say this. Let's come back to this
Yes.
topic of also talking about leadership from the old and young point of view. What about functional aspects to leadership? There are different functions in an organization. Do you see different types of leadership challenges in the different functions as well? From marketing to sales to R&D, supply chain, finance, all those, and even beyond.
So if I look at the FMCG setup, the FMCG setup is so far that marketing
Mm.
leads or brand
Hmm.
management leads, right? That's what it is. R&D delivers what we tell them to
Yeah.
deliver. Yeah. um, and when you have that kind of a setup, in my mind, then in some cases we might not be taking we might not be developing a culture which is more prone to risk taking, or leadership that's encouraging to go out
Yeah.
and fail. And why I say that is because when I look at the tech side, or companies that are led by engineers or
Hmm.
programmers, those companies, their risk appetite is a bit
Higher.
more.
Yeah.
Simply because they will have the safe team and they will have the disruptive team as
Mm.
well in the tech setup. And the research and the R&D side of things is where some big waves are coming
Hmm.
in itself. So in my mind, the main leadership challenge, and especially if we want to keep the young ones engaged who want autonomy, um, so it will, if we don't disrupt this, then they'll come and disrupt
And
it.
this is where I guess it
um,
gets interesting because most of the organizational CEOs that we see are not of the same mindset as the younger generation. Where is the leadership gap
mm.
in your point of view? Is it that the young are not willing to listen to the older generation, or the older generation doesn't understand what the younger generation wants?
Hard one, because if I see, and when we were young, let's look at it this way: when we were young, CEOs and HR heads and marketing at that time were actually very old.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe a bit headed towards retirement age,
Yeah.
like old.
True.
Yeah. And that lot around the world is slowly retiring, and the next person in charge might be a 45
Mhm.
year old or a late 40-year-old man or a woman taking
Maximum
over.
early 50s, let's put it this way.
Exactly,
Yeah.
maximum, yeah. um, so already the age gap is decreasing between the youngest employee and the oldest employee, in that respect. I think the issue at hand is that the CEOs maybe that have taken over, or the leadership that has taken over, they have a certain work ethic. um, and their work ethic was very heavily influenced by boomers,
That's
because
what they saw.
they were tortured tortured by
Yeah.
the boomers. Yeah, to say yes boss, boss, right? So boss was just used all the time as a word. You couldn't even take their name. It was
Yeah.
boss. So they were, and they now think that we could do the same. Now they know they can't do the same. Things have changed, but there is a resistance and a tension between them. So the middle generation, if it is us or um, Gen X
Mm.
and us, those are the ones who've taken over
Yeah.
companies, right? Those are kind of stuck in between. They're being banned by Gen Z, and they were tortured
Yeah.
by boomers. So we're kind of stuck in we're stuck in between, and we will have to compromise. But we will have to help the Gen Z to not force them to compromise on what's important to them, their values, respect that. And their definition of showing commitment to work is different to our definition, so we have to adjust that. But we also know that the evidence and the research evidence suggests that Gen Z, they're very weak in things related to communication, presenting, influencing, understanding the corporate culture. um, uh, and they think it's politics, and they hate it itself. And that's where we have to
Okay.
help them. We will have to coach them, so that they're able to maneuver that system and build those skills, and have more pleasure out of the work environment versus right now.
Of course, the pandemic has also caused a lot of disruption in the way we work.
Yes.
And I think, in a way, the one positive out of the pandemic is the understanding that uh, I think remote working can still be something that most organizations can live with, which probably at our time was never even possible. So a meeting had to be in a room with the people there, and even having a video call, forget video call, even a telephone call was out of the question. So that has helped. However, you talk about the Gen Z, but I want you to also then touch upon Gen Z versus millennials, because we're also seeing millennials enter the workspace. Can you differentiate between the Gen Z mindset and the millennial mindset? And secondly, do you think that there is a similarity between these two generations versus the Gen Z and the Gen Y and the boomers?
I think the millennials, which is us actually, we're a bit more closer to Gen Z versus the ones
Okay.
before us. Um,
Wait, are you saying I'm a
and I
millennial?
say that, yeah, aren't you? Aren't you almost? No,
I
you're not.
don't.
I realize. I just remembered your date. No, you're
I
not.
really want to thank you for considering me a millennial, but yeah, okay.
I'm borderline, so it's okay. Um,
Okay.
I'm borderline millennial. But yeah, you have the heart of a millennium.
Yeah, I would like to think that as well. Young at heart.
Yes, heart of a millennial. Yeah, young at heart. Um, from a mindset point of view itself, um, the biggest aspect is that we experienced technology
Mm,
as well, maybe a bit later in our
mm,
early teens, and they experienced technology all throughout. So there's a bit more overlap in there and its
yeah.
impact on us. I think that's there. And then it was during our generation itself, or us hitting the mid 30s in our career, when we started realizing and started questioning, in our friend circle as well, is this what I want to do all my
Mm,
life? If I would have spent this many hours on doing something that I liked, I would have been so, like, these were the conversations that we used to have as well. Family, the importance of spending time with your family, especially men wanting to contribute at home, being present fathers, versus the generations before. Those were things that our generation really
mm-hmm.
wanted
Yeah.
to do. So Gen Z is actually is an extreme form, maybe, who's fighting the good
Mm,
fight. and we're benefiting from it on the side, huh?
Interesting.
um, Itself. So there is, I think there are more similarities, and the things which they disagree with us, making them, yes, there is a culture aspect to it as well. But I've seen when you get a millennial manager in your team versus a Gen Z manager, we feel that, oh, this person will get us. But with the Gen Z, it's like, we're walking on eggshells, and we're a bit more sensitive about what we say, because they'll question us on the project and its vision and why and where is it contributing. And the millennial will be like, yeah, yeah, okay, fine, I get it, what you want, and I'll
Yeah.
just get it done. The questioning is also very
And this
different.
is actually one of the things that I saw in your conversation also with Hakima, that millennials would, and correct me if I'm wrong, millennials want to be left alone because you've given them a task and they will come back with the result, but you don't need to ask them over and over again. But for someone who's older, how do you take that out of your system and not have a constant up to date information? How do you manage that?
That's the reality, as they want more autonomy. Well, if you are not going to control it, then they'll tell you off. So
Which would
it's
never have happened in our time. Yeah.
never, never, never,
Yeah.
never, ever. We would have allowed to be invaded in our personal space, in our personal
Yeah.
private time.
True.
Yes. um, or this need of continuous follow up. What's happening?
Mm.
What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? It's absolute madness. Like I said, Adil, things that we never liked, they were. It means that they were never
Yeah, that's
right.
true.
They were not right ever. Just because we got used to it doesn't mean they didn't make it right. It wasn't even right when it was happening to our bosses when they were
Mm.
young. And it's not right even now. And in the, before, the challenge was bigger because there was no tech. Laptops were given to us when we were a bit more into our careers.
Correct.
So I guess at that time, you people knew that, once they've gone home, how will I know? I need to know now, now, now,
Yeah.
now, now. But no need. You'll know when it's
Okay,
done.
tell me, we have a little bit more time left, and I want to end it on a positive note. But before that, I mean, it was a great conversation. Where do you think the style of leadership is headed, in your opinion, with the people that you're working with? What is the biggest challenge that you're seeing right now being handled when it comes to leadership requirements?
I don't know how to articulate it in a sharp way, but the main challenge that I'm seeing more and more is the conventional big organizations itself. Um, the younger lot is not too convinced by the purpose that is being sold to them.
So, company purpose is a huge thing for them.
It's becoming because they want to make sure they work for an organization that stands for goodness, good values, or values that are important to them.
Very interesting.
So that is a big tension. So you have to, don't want to use this, but I don't know what else to say. You have to walk the
Yeah.
talk.
So it's
I've seen organizations.
topics like diversity, inclusion, these would be, and environment. So these would be very important to them.
These are very critical because, again, there's a book by the name of The Anxious Generation, and it's about Gen Z. And it's a generation which is plagued by anxiety. Obviously, social media has a lot to play, but even things like climate change, it brings anxiety to them.
Absolutely. It brings anxiety to me thinking about it. Right.
So so for them, it's that
Okay.
important that it has a physiological impact on them. So a company saying that we'll do climate change and then backpedaling on it,
Okay. All right.
uh, it does not sit
Okay.
well.
And in your current role, in this new position that you've done, I know that you've done over 100 hours of leadership coaching. Um, if one
Yeah.
was to try to get into this field, what would you suggest? How would you guide them?
I think one is obviously important that your own personal experience plays a it's a big role. It so if you've done a good 10 hours of a good company corporate role, then you'll feel more comfortable jumping into
Okay.
it, because you would have had enough experience with people. As far as how to turn this in some sort of a profession, um, I'd heard about coaching, but um, I didn't give it that much respect.
Mm.
Um, and I didn't want to just do it by figuring it out on my own. I wanted to learn
Mm.
it properly. So it helps a lot if you do it with a program
Okay.
provider who specializes in leadership coaching. So that's what I did, and it was a good 1 year program in which you have to do coaching, real people, and you learn as well the skills and the tools. So the interesting thing in this is are the tools. They like sometimes HR uses things on us, and we're like, whatever, this is so lame. Uh, those are those
Yeah.
moments. But in the coaching, the tools they give you, they work very well in changing your perception about things. That's what I like about the tools. They're not the gimmicky tools. They're tools that will, if you're thinking that the sky is gray, it will tell you, ask that question in a different way, and then suddenly the sky will look
Interesting.
white. So it reframes it in your head. So I like the soft way of reframing, using visuals, helping people. So it's interesting to learn that technique, then applying it. So yes, I would always suggest people go through the accreditation process, learn the tools. It helps me. Plus I like information like that. I like to get my data in the system before winging it. I don't want to just wing it. uh, and that's what it is,
Um,
in whatever
Maybe
I
one last
experienced.
question on this topic. How do you differentiate leadership and mentoring?
um so in mentoring, the main difference comes in is, and that's where things get muddled as well, because in mentoring, you use your experience to give the other person
Mm.
direction, and you will end up even giving direct advice, and you're there alongside them, but you're giving them direct advice. um, I wouldn't compare mentoring with leadership, because I would compare coaching to mentoring.
Interesting.
um, uh, because in case of leadership, you could be a mentor, you could be a coach, you can be, you can try both things depending on what the need is. And in coaching, you're getting the other person to find the solutions for themselves.
Okay. So mentoring offers personal advice, whereas coaching tries to let the person come with the solution. All right.
Yes.
So that's interesting.
And the main benefit in this is in coaching that eventually you get so used to going to yourself for the answer that you'll eventually self coach
Oh,
yourself.
that's lovely. That's actually one of the things I wanted to know. That does one need to be coached all the time, or does it come to a point where you know how to solve the solution, get to the solution yourself? That's good. Right.
Eventually, yes, you it should ideal. Obviously, your situations might change. You might go back to your coach, but the coach should be good enough to help you and leave some tools with you that you can use later on, even when the coach
All
isn't
right.
around.
So, Sadaf, thank you so much for your time. It was such a pleasure talking to you and listening to you. Normally, at the end of this podcast, what I try to do is also a rapid fire round. And you have to
Ah.
answer the first thing that comes to your mind rather than, okay,
Okay.
let me think about a politically correct answer. All right. They're very simple questions, nothing
Okay.
too difficult. So I'll start with the
Hmm.
easiest one that I ask all my Pakistani fellows. Chai or coffee? Oh my
Coffee.
God, I just don't know you anymore. The amount of time we
Okay.
sat and had chai at the Unilever chai stand, I don't even know you right now, woman. Right? Okay. Meetha biscuit, yeah, salty biscuit. Okay.
Salty.
And are you a morning person or a night person?
Night person before my toddler, morning person after my toddler.
A forced change in habit. Okay. Desi food lover or a lover of all cuisines?
All.
Okay. Shalwar kameez or the jeans and pants?
Jeans and
Jeans and
pant.
pants. Okay. And the last question that I would have is something very basic. What is the one thing that you miss about back home that you wish you had living in the UK? Hmm,
Family.
that's absolutely true. All right, wanted to end on a positive note, but yeah, that would suffice.
Family, cleaning lady, driver,
Yeah. So basically,
free
cleaning
food,
lady, nashta banane wala, and then
cleaning
family.
lady, and then fine. I
Fine.
miss my mom and dad.
All right. So,
Fine,
Sadaf,
whatever.
thank you so much for taking out the time. It's always a pleasure listening to you, hearing you, and I'm loving the sessions that you're now starting on social media. There's a lot for people to learn. I'll put the links to your social media and your website below, and if people can reach out to you, they can use those links as well. So, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Adil. I had a really good time. I loved the very open
That's what we
conversation.
try to do here.
So yeah, good.
So, all right.
Yeah,
Take care.
good.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.